Unique facility, and it's great to be back here again. Last time we were here, we were talking about more female apprentices, more female workers, particularly beginning their study and getting a head start on their apprenticeship and their qualification for year 11 and 12. Today we're here to mark the fact that there's 4,200 North East Link employees. So of the 10,000 jobs that are created through the North East Link, a link between the M80 Ring Road and the Eastern Freeway that'll see 135,000 vehicles use that link every single day, 35-minute travel time saving, and of course 15,000 trucks out of local roads, so giving local roads back to local residents. 4,200 of those staff have been through safety training that is delivered in a unique environment, unique in our country and indeed unique in the world. So using VR technology, using the very best of high tech, we're able to make sure that people have got the skills to do the job, but also to do it safely. And instead of, you get a couple of benefits from that. You're able to train people quicker, but you're also able to make sure that you train people about safety in a safe way. So you can train people about chemicals, for instance, without having to use those chemicals. You can have people trained up on all manner of different incidents and accidents that might occur in a project without exposing them to any of the risks or any of the substances that would be involved. It seems a simple thing, but the last thing we want is safety training to be compromising people's safety. So I want to thank Holmes Glen for all the work that they do. I want to thank all of our partners, particularly those who are delivering, Duncan's here, those who are delivering the North East Link. This is the biggest road project in our state's history and one of the biggest in the country. It is on track. It is really starting to take shape now. So much of the early works and early stages are well and truly underway. Some of them are indeed finished. Tunnel boring machines will launch in the first half of next year, and cutter heads that are, this is a metro tunnel sized one. It goes from 9.2 metres to more than 15 metres. They will be here later this year, and they'll have to be all reassembled, having come from the other side of the world, and then we will launch those in the first half of next year. So this project is going along very well. It's long overdue. We do wish that the gap in our ring road had been filled many decades ago. Of course it wasn't. It's left for our government to do that work, and we are getting on and delivering that project and so many other projects that Victorians voted for, that create jobs and set us up as we approach being Australia's biggest city, and it's not too many years away before we will be Australia's biggest city, and we need a public transport and road network that's fit for purpose at that time, and of course we need these jobs and these skills, not just for these projects and for this moment, but for many, many decades to come as we continue to build and prosper. I'll now ask Jacinta Allen, the Transport Infrastructure Minister, to add to my comments, and then I've got a couple of other things I want to go to, and then we'll go to questions after that. Over to you, JA.
Thanks, Premier. It's great to be back here at the Victorian Tunnelling Centre, and as the Premier said, this is the only centre of its kind in Australia. It's supported by our projects in a great partnership with Holmes Glen TAFE, and it's where, whether you're a tunnel worker on the North East Link, the suburban rail loop, or finishing up on the tunnelling work that's happening at the moment on the West Gate Tunnel, this is a place where you can come and get that specialised civil construction training in a training environment and in a safe training environment as well. And this Centre of Excellence, the Tunnelling Centre of Excellence, is supporting, because of our pipeline of tunnels, it's supporting the pipeline of workers who will come and work on those important projects. And to take that one step further, what we're seeing here is, in an Australian first, that virtual training that can support the workers on our, particularly in this instance, the North East Link project, to undertake important specialised training, and as the Premier has emphasised, in a very safe environment, because these are challenging and complex underground environments, and it's important that not only our workforce have those great skills that they need to do this important work, but also have the safety training as well. And across our Big Build program, we pride ourselves in operating at very, very high safety standards, and this tunnelling centre centre is an important part of that overall effort to keep our projects going, to keep a pipeline of workers on our projects, and to keep them safe as well. As we're saying, the workers here will go through specialised training to then go out and continue their work on the North East Link project, and this project is powering ahead. In Watsonia right now, the huge tunnel boring machine launch box is being constructed, 40 metres deep, 200 metres wide, where later this year the tunnel boring machines will arrive and be launched will be launched next year to commence their important tunnelling work. And we're not wasting a moment in getting on and delivering this important missing link in our road network. It's literally the North East Link has been a line on a Melways map for longer than the Premier and I have been alive. It's been talked about for a very, very long time. We have to get on and do it because it's taking trucks off local roads. It'll take 15,000 trucks off local roads. It'll provide important travel time savings. It'll also provide that efficient and better connection in our road network for the movement of people and also support our freight industry. And this is critically important that we continue to push on and deliver this project. And like we have with level crossings, whilst we're delivering the North East Link tunnels, we're also supporting open space, community sporting facilities, 34 kilometres of walking and cycling connections, as well as the improvements to the road network in that local community. So we'll continue to see work power ahead on the North East Link project, and it's powering ahead thanks to the great workforce that we have working on these projects and the training they're getting here at the Victorian Tunnelling Centre of Excellence. I'll hand back to
Very good. Just a couple of other matters I wanted to go to before we go to questions. As you know, IBAC have today tabled a report. We thank them for what they term an educational report, a report under their, if you like, the role that they play in trying to educate all of us about risks and about ways in which we can deliver continuous improvement. We thank them for that report. There are 17 recommendations made in that important educational report. I will lead, as the Chair of the Cabinet, a Cabinet process to consider those issues, and we will respond in due course. But we're grateful for that educational report and those 17 findings, those 17 recommendations, I should say, and we will get on with that work and update you. I do want to make a couple of points. There are no findings against anyone in this report. It is an educational report, and they're not my words. That's the way in which IBAC themselves have described this. But the recommendations do go to a number of serious matters, important matters, and we will give proper consideration as part of a proper Cabinet government process to each of those. The staff members that are referred to in this report do not work for the government anymore and have not worked for the government for years. And of course, as you well know, the two ministers who are referenced in the report are not even members of the Parliament any longer. So obviously, I am accountable and fundamentally responsible for driving a process to consider those 17 recommendations, to look at them very carefully, to potentially further engage with IBAC to seek their advice, and then to respond once that work has been done. This matter has not been to Cabinet. It's not possible for this to go to Cabinet, and I think that given the educational elements of this, it's not about taking action immediately. It's not about necessarily responding to calls for action and findings that have been made against anybody. There are no findings against anyone in this report. I think we do have the time to get this right, and we should. And I think there are also some issues in the report that are perhaps a little bit out of date. There are some things that have already happened, some processes that are live and are on foot. But again, we will do that work and we'll report progress to you once that work is finished. Just before we go to questions, there's been a lot of discussion and I made some comments yesterday about just how heartbreaking, how challenging it is for families that are caught up in this Porter Davis mess. I can confirm that there was a lot of work done. There's been a power of work done over now a couple of weeks, but there was quite a lot of work done yesterday. I'll be in some meetings and discussions later on today and into the evening tonight, and I hope to be able to, and I'm confident that we'll be able to, before the end of the week, we'll be able to have more to say about direct support for those families because we know just how challenging, just how deeply heartbreaking and really stressful and difficult this time is. I again make the point that it's really important that we get this right. I think the notion this has taken a little bit of time because we're having to try and work out exactly what's happened here and trying to work out exactly what's happened by way of the conduct of some people and that Porter-Davis business, as well as what it means for individual customers. And I am confident that I'll be able to, following tonight's meetings and this afternoon's meetings, I'm hopeful and very confident that I'll be able to have more to say before the end of the week. Just in terms of, I know we've talked about this quite a lot, and it is frustrating, I know, for everybody that we haven't been able to make an announcement to this point, but getting it right is, I think, the most important thing, and that's what we're working towards. I'm happy to take we are happy to take any questions you have.
Do you think you said you accept responsibility, you didn't apologise. Do you think you have anything to say sorry for?
Well, my role, Raf, is to be accountable, of course, and again, I just stress, I've seen some of the coverage this morning. I just stress again, for people watching and listening, that there are no findings against anyone in this report. The Anti-Corruption Commission has looked at a series of matters from some years ago and have found no corrupt conduct. So that's just a fact. And it's really important that that fact is out there and that people know it and clearly understand that. My responsibility, I can't change what happened 4 or 5 years ago. The people involved are either no longer in the Parliament, or from a staff point of view, they don't work for the government anymore. They don't work for the public service. They haven't done for years. So my responsibility is to look at the 17 recommendations in an educational report, not a report delivered because wrongdoing was found. This is a report under the education powers that the Integrity Agency has, their role to try and make sure that we've got continuous improvement and we do everything we can to make sure that the highest standards are met in the future, that educational prevention role, if you like. My role is to lead that cabinet process, and I will, and we'll sit down as a cabinet and work through those 17 recommendations. There is some complexity to some of those. This is not simple work, and we'll do that properly. That's the fundamental responsibility
it's
that I
just
have.
That there's lots of watchdog reports into your government.
Sorry,
there's lots of different reports. They often say the same thing, that there are political advisors or staffers making government decisions without asking people in government.
Well,
that keeps happening.
Yeah, hang on a minute. I don't know that this report makes that finding at all.
That's explicitly what it's talking about, isn't it? That there are people making decisions and they can't track the responsibility of those who were responsible.
Yeah, sure. And we'll answer all the questions today like we do every day, right? So there's no need for anyone to be shouting over each other. And I'm not here to have an argument with anyone, and I'm certainly not here to have an argument with an integrity agency that has provided us with an educational report and recommendations that we have not had time to properly consider just yet, right? So that's an important point to make. However, I don't believe that the report finds that staff are making decisions for ministers. Like, ministers are supported by their staff to get on and deliver what Victorians voted for, and that's exactly as it should be. Now, there are a whole range of issues raised. We can't change any of that. As I said before, those staff no longer work for the government, and that didn't happen last week or last month. They haven't worked for the government for years. Some of them right back like more than 4 years ago left the government. The ministers in question, and I'm not making any comments for or against any of the people that are mentioned in the report, and I won't be naming the people that have not been named because IBAC themselves made a judgment that it was not appropriate to name them. The report is there, it speaks for itself.
It's not a clean bill of health though, is it? It doesn't say, yeah, everything's awesome.
No, but it's...
And there's a number of reports.
Of course
in
it
the same
doesn't.
vein.
No, of course it doesn't. What it says is, in 17 different recommendations, there are ways in which we can do more, not to deal with conduct that is actually happening, but to prevent conduct happening in the future. And that's a really important thing. That's a really important thing. And that's why we... I'm not just going to stand here today and say, no worries, we're going to accept all of this and it'll all happen like some sort of magic thing. Like, it should be done properly, and we should have a proper cabinet government process, and we should sit down, as we are. So, for instance, when Watts came forward, Cabinet had a discussion about these matters before I went out and announced to you guys that not only would we accept, I think it's an altogether different report, but just from a process point of view is the reason I raised this. Cabinet sat down, went through it, we accepted the recommendations, and in fact, I wanted Cabinet approval because we went beyond the recommendations. So there's a lot of work going on in different areas. This will be added to that body of work. The Parliament's also doing a whole lot of work as well, and that's the responsibility I have, to make sure that we pick up the recommendations, the suggestions, to prevent things happening in the future, to continuously improve our frameworks, and that's exactly what we'll do. No, sorry, Simon. Sorry, Simon. This matter was referred to IBAC. They didn't think it met the threshold. They sent it to the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman sent it back saying they didn't think it met the threshold. IBAC then did their work, and it didn't meet the threshold. So they have put it forward. No, it did not. No, I'm sorry. It did no. No, but see, I'm sorry, Samaya, and let's not interrupt each other. The point I was just about to make, was that it did not meet the threshold. There have been no findings of corrupt conduct made against anybody. But what it does do is provide IBAC with an opportunity under their role to educate and drive continuous improvement. It does provide an opportunity for an educational report under their education functions. They're not my words. That's not my description. That is what the report is, and that's what IBAC says it is. And that's why the 17 recommendations don't recommend action be taken against individuals or any of that sort of stuff. It says, okay, this is what happened some years ago. Here's a bunch of different things that we can do, that the government should look to do to make sure that we have even better frameworks in the future, not just in relation to these narrow set of issues or this one particular issue, but in a broader context. And the other thing too, I'll just say, there's some very kind of sweeping narrative in this report. There's a discussion about all manner of different principles, all manner of different issues that are about policy, if you like, not so much about individual practice or any individual person. They're in a much broader context, and that's the work that we'll do. It's called an educational report because it's in fulfilment of the education obligations that the agency has under their Act.
The report found that staff in your office and ministerial staff essentially acted with impunity because of the culture that your leadership has set and around the centralisation of power bypassing political processes. Ministerial your staff aren't accountable to the public. The two ministers have left. You don't recall what you would announce. Who will be accountable to the Victorian public?
No, well, let me go back to the last part of your question, Samaya. It was put to I was asked to recount what I said at a press conference. I provided an honest account. I was wrong, and I freely conceded that I was wrong. Like, I don't know what. So all I'm saying is that if you're going to describe what I did and didn't say, let's do that accurately. That's the only point that I'm making. In terms of who's accountable, I'm always accountable for everything that happens in the government. And what IBAC's asking us to do is to look at the 17 recommendations, and that's exactly what we'll do. Simple. Well, no, I don't accept that. You have paraphrased the report, and I don't. Well, there's no finding. No. Well, I'm sorry. You've just put something to me that I don't think is in the report at all, Rachel. There are no findings. No, hang on a minute. There was a good deal of editorial beyond the quote that you did a quote, and then you put something else to me. you put something else to me, and I don't think the two things lined up necessarily. There are no findings against anybody in this report. No findings against anybody. And I think that's not an unimportant point to make. Yeah, exactly. Well, and that, well, the mere fact that, no, well, again, I'm not accepting the premise that you're putting to me, Rachel. The fact that two things are mentioned in a report means that they're both linked and the same thing. Well, again, I'm not accepting the characterisation that you're putting forward about me or the government. Well, no, you are. Well, again, I think I've. Well, then, well, there's commentary in the report. There are no findings in the report against anyone.
Do you want to comment on the commentary?
No, it's not appropriate for me to be paraphrasing or commenting on commentary. Like, there's a narrative in this report. There are no findings against anybody. The Corruption Commission has not found any corrupt conduct.
But
a really important point.
Now,
Hang on,
continually talk about grey corruption.
Hang on a second.
So it's worth talking about, isn't it?
Yes, and where, again, the issues that IBAC raise in very broad, sweeping, often undefined terms are picked up in a series of recommendations that have been made. And we will look at those recommendations. Like, we can only do what IBAC has asked us to do, and that is to look at the 17 recommendations. They've not asked that action be taken against anyone. They've not found that action should be taken against anyone. They've not found that anyone acted corruptly. They are, after all, the Anti-Corruption Commission, so they'd be pretty uniquely placed to make such a finding if that was appropriate. The only thing that can be done here, so if your question to me is what are we going to do about this, well, I'll tell you, we're going to go through a proper cabinet process and look at every one of the 17 recommendations, and there'll be a back and forth with IBAC, I'm sure, and we'll look at that properly with a due process, and then we'll make further announcements and we'll report our progress to you when that work is done. Nothing more, nothing less, and I think that's the appropriate thing to do. Well, IBAC describes it that way. Just to be, no, hang on, I'll absolutely let you finish your question and then I'll answer it. But it is just important though, it's not me calling it that, that's what IBAC call it. It's produced pursuant to and in fulfilment of their educational role under their Act of Parliament. That's their phrasing. That's why, that's what they say about their work. Well, I think if you were to draw the inference that you're perhaps drawing, then you wouldn't have an education function at all. If the notion of continuous improvement, well, Rachel, I don't know what that, I'm not sure what that is about, but like, the continuous improvement is part of their role. So you kind of can't have it both ways. So should we respond to the recommendations and safeguard against, any and all bad practice in the future, or shouldn't we? I think that we should. I think we should thank IBAC for their work, as I have, and we should, continuous improvement. Well, that's my expectation. No, but it's not. No, hang on. It's not just the government. No, I'm sorry, it's the Mayor again. Yes, but you're indicating that the only... No. What you've just put to me is that the report is for the express education of one group of people. That's not what the education function of IBAC is about. It's about educating... No, hang on. No, I'm sorry, that's not correct. This is to educate the public service, and there are specific references to no better authority to confirm the point I just made. The Victorian Public Sector Commissioner is referenced in the recommendations, some of them. So this is to educate literally hundreds of thousands of public servants in agencies and individual government departments and of course to educate everybody else who works with them, everybody to whom they report. It's to educate everybody. It's not educating just a small number of people. And I think if you look at the nature of the recommendations, the detail of them, like the mere reference to the Victorian Public Sector Commissioner ought to be the giveaway here. It's not just about educating members of Parliament, it's about educating bureaucrats as well. All of them, in agencies, and not just those who work now, but those who will come afterwards. That's what IBAC's educational functions are all about. No, I don't believe so.
The report found that staff in your office and ministerial office interfered in a contract that was against the public interest. Isn't that alarming? Doesn't that concern you more in a way that's more than an educational purpose?
Well, there's a series of recommendations that go directly to what can be done to make sure that we continuously improve, have the highest of standards, and make sure that things are absolutely appropriate in the future. And the mere well, I'm taking responsibility for the implementation and the proper consideration of the recommendations that have been made. That's what IBAC's asked us to do. So IBAC have asked us to do something, and I'm telling you we're going to do it. But IBAC have not found any corrupt conduct by anyone, and any suggestion to the contrary would not be borne out by the report. Now, the reason I raised the fact that the staff mentioned don't work for the government and haven't worked for the government for years is that if they did now, I'm sure you'd be asking me about, well, what was their future? What was going to happen to them? Would there be any sanctions? And obviously there can't be, because there's none are recommended, and they don't work for the government. The two ministers aren't even in the Parliament anymore, so I'm not going to try and speak for them or speak against them or anybody. But they're free to have their own views, and the report goes into some detail, from all the people that I've just mentioned, some named and some not named. They've all provided evidence and gone through detail, and it's all sitting there in the 130 odd pages.
The report also...
Yes. Yes. It's a really good it's a really good question. Page 127 of the report makes it very clear that there is no suggestion that I knew of the problems in that the administration of the first part of that, the pre-2018 stuff, right? So that's really clear. Just before anyone gets any ideas that we should have been alive to this and not made the election commitment. That's not the case at all, and IBAC goes directly to that. In relation to in terms of the substance of your question, Rachel, I didn't announce a tender. I didn't announce the winner. I announced a partnership, and and a partnership. I did not announce. I didn't stand up and say, and this will be provided by a RTO that's connected to all of that. That detail was not there. And I can tell you, because I've made a few announcements in my time, and I've had a few partnerships in my time, and we've got a fair bit done in our time. And any commitments are always predicated on the pretty self-evident logic that you would be capable of delivering what we are partnering with you to do. That you would do it to the highest standard. That you would be up to the task. And the fact that's borne out as well by the constant and repeated and very clear acknowledgement by IBAC that at various points I was very keen to see a TAFE provider, much like the one we're standing at right now, be the partner to deliver this training. Now, again, I'm not here to paraphrase the report, nor am I here, I don't think it's helpful necessarily to go through the report line by line. It's there. The recommendations are there as well. And we're going to do that hard work as a cabinet properly, with a proper process to work through those 17 different recommendations. And then when we've done that work, then we will report progress to you.
Why did you make a $2.2 million election commitment before the tender had even been finalised?
Sorry?
Why did you make a $2.2 million election commitment to extend a contract that hadn't been finalised yet?
Wasn't involved in the awarding of that contract, and IBAC makes that very, very clear. You're talking about pre-18.
So pre-18 on October 27th.
So there's a violence task force. There's some training comes out of that. There's a process that I'm not involved in because I'm not involved in that. Pre-18. Then we made an election commitment to go further, and it wasn't just violence training either. It was the other part of the announcement was scholarships, so that cooks and cleaners can have a career progression within our hospitals. That's what we announced out at the Austin. I was not involved in that tender process, the pre-election, the before the election commitment process, and IBAC makes that very, very clear. That's what's referenced on page 127 of the report. Now, it's clear now that there were substantial problems with that, but it's also equally clear that I was not involved in that process and wasn't aware of it. If I had been, well, then perhaps we would have made a different election commitment. But I would just again make the same point, that we didn't announce that they'd be the provider. We announced that there'd be a partnership. And then there was a lot of work done to try and have a TAFE inserted into that partnership as well. So again, I'm not here to paraphrase the report, but if you're asking me why did I not take account of the troubles with the program pre-2018 when I made a commitment at the end of 2018, well, I can hardly be guided by things that I had no involvement or knowledge of.
The report talks about public servants fearing missing out on promotion because they fear losing their jobs. The quote is that they would get their marching orders. Do you acknowledge that happened?
Well, that's not our practice. I don't believe. I've been in the Parliament 20 years, right? And I've worked with ministerial officers, obviously as a minister, and before that as a parliamentary secretary. I have worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of public servants, always at a very senior level. And again, I did a moment ago say I wasn't going to speak for or against anybody who's mentioned in this report because they've already been through a process and the report speaks for itself. But
someone clearly
it's not
had that
my
fear,
practice. It's not my practice to speak. It's never been my practice, nor will it ever be my practice to speak to junior public servants. I deal with the most senior,
Sure.
and I've
But
done
I'm
this as a
asking
minister.
if you acknowledge that happened, because that criticism comes up a lot.
I'm coming to your point. I deal with members of the departmental executive, secretaries, deputy secretaries, on occasion executive directors, like very, very senior public servants. I do not engage, and it would be very rare for my office to engage, or any ministerial office, in my experience, to engage with more junior public servants because there is a power imbalance there. It is not appropriate, and that isn't just custom and practice. That's the way things operate, and there's very clear codes, ministerial staff codes, as well as the various acts of the Parliament as well. Like, it's very clear. On what you're putting to me, that's not my experience at all. That's not my experience at all, and as a government that has grown the public service and often been criticised for it, I don't think we're synonymous with less public servants. We've been synonymous with many, many more, and working hard, doing good work. So no, I don't know that's not my experience.
Can I just ask you about something? You described Robert Redlich once as some guy who used to run an agency who wrote a letter. He's also when he wrote that letter, he was the head of the agency that did this report and other reports into your government. Do you regret using those words? Was that a lack of respect for someone who's got a really important job?
I don't believe so, but people are free to have their own. Look, if we're really going to get into a debate and a discussion about my turn of phrase or his, or and then we had another former judge who I've never met, who doesn't know a thing about me, decided that he'd give me a spray in the newspaper
I'm
as
just
well.
asking you about your words.
We can have a debate about people's feelings being hurt and turns of phrase.
Are they the respectful words to use about anti-corruption?
I try and be respectful, and I think you would all agree that we have our robust exchanges, but I'm pretty sure that we conduct our business on on a respectful basis. I would have thought that was a fair thing to say, wouldn't it? Isn't it? I'll take that as a yes. I'll take that. They didn't all say no, so we can take that as a yes. It's a matter for IBAC. It's a matter for IBAC. That's a matter for IBAC. That's a matter for IBAC. Once. I believe so. I don't know. It took as long as it took. Like, it wasn't 10 minutes, but I wasn't running it. I wasn't timing it, Simon. I was there. And the other thing too, just before, there's a bit of stuff around about, things. When you're under oath, if you haven't got absolute to a certainty recall, then you say so. Like, I don't know whether people would want you to be turning up just, making it up. Oh, I reckon it's not a chat with a mate down at the pub. Like, you're under oath. And if you don't have absolute clarity, if you're not certain, then you say as much. No. Yeah. And I'll tell you. Let me tell you exactly what happened. Right at the end of, I don't know how long it was, but it wasn't 10 minutes. But right at the end of answering questions about these issues, they asked me about the press conference, and I said, "Oh, well, it was something to the effect of, it was a while ago, but I think I said this and I think I said that," and then they played me the news footage. I think certainly they played a video of the presser, and I had said everything that I said I'd said, plus something else. I talked about the partnership. And I said, "Oh, fair enough, fine." And that's what happened. So it was in real time. It wasn't like, one day and then, came back another week later. No, it was all done in the one thing. It was an exchange back and forth. And I'll freely confess, I do not have perfect recall of every single press conference I have ever done. Nor do I reckon any of you do either. That's kind of part of being human. Very rarely I would. Yeah, well, I don't want to. The report's gone into some detail on that, and there are recommendations around those issues. And I did say I didn't want to speak for or against any of those people. They've been through a process. The report speaks for itself. I'm just talking about my practice and what I believe to be appropriate. I'll let you draw your conclusions. I've said what I think is appropriate. You can make your own conclusions about what, therefore, is in my judgment inappropriate. I'm not here to be criticising people. There's been a report. The report does that. The report deals with that. But it's not my practice, socially. You see people at meetings and things, like, you're pleasant. It's not like we ignore each other. But I don't pick up the phone and talk to junior staff. That's not bureaucrats. That's not something that I would do, because that'd be a bit unfair on them, I think.
Operation Watts was highly critical of ministerial staff as well, and I guess the culture around ministerial and political staffers. The Ombudsman is looking into the politicisation of public service. Both Deborah Glass and Robert Redlich have raised serious concerns in the past about the growth of the PPO and also the number of ministerial advisors as well as political staffers. Will you commit to reining that in? Jill Hennessy and Jenny McCarthy have also spoken.
Yeah, I saw their comments in the report. I saw their comments in the. Well, I don't accept that. I don't think that's accurate.
So they didn't speak about the growth in the size of the
certainly
PPO
never spoke to me about it. No.
government.
I said I saw the comments. The comments are there in black and white. Not comments that were ever made to me. Not concerns that were ever raised to me in thousands of interactions with the two people you've just cited over 20 years, and in fact longer than that actually. Never had those concerns had never been raised with me. But again, they are in the report. That's fine. That might be their view. But on the issue, on what I'm disputing or what I disagree with is this sweeping contention that my office is not working hard to deliver all the election commitments we made, to deal with the challenges we confront as a state, and to get on and get things done. That's what my office does.
Is it appropriate though?
And indeed, it's what every ministerial office does as well. And just on the issue, like, I know that some of you, probably all of you over time, have, for the best of reasons, rung my office and raised individual issues. People you've done stories on, friends and family that have got a problem, an issue, a difficulty. That's your right. You didn't go to the minister's office. You went to my office.
Because the media advisors are in your office.
But then my office would go and speak to a ministerial office. Like, the notion that there's something inherently wrong with the Premier's private office, like working hard and having a clear job to do and talking thousands of times a day with ministers' offices, it just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. And as for centralisation of this and power, and like, we're about getting things done. And there's some commentary and narrative, and there's an opinion put forward by some, and that they're entitled to do that. I'm not required to agree with that if, in fact, I don't agree with it. And I'll put it to you that I've got a pretty active understanding of how the show works. It's my office.
Do you agree that power has been centralised in your office?
No, I don't accept that at all. I don't. Well, I'll put it to you this way, Samaya. I was a member of the Bracks government. I was a member of the Brumby government, and of course, I've been a member of the government that I lead. I've got some appreciation of other governments too over my journey, albeit I wasn't in the Parliament. I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's accurate at all. I can remember being a pretty junior minister, getting a phone call from Sharon McCrowan, and she wasn't ringing up. She was ringing up on behalf of the Premier, right? Like, the notion that somehow the fact that the Premier's office today is vastly different to what it used to be in the past, and it used to be some sort of timid outfit no, that's just not right. That's just not right. And I wouldn't expect integrity agencies who run very, very sweeping and broad commentary to have any appreciation whatsoever of what occurred in previous Labor governments or Liberal governments. Look, I don't think Michael Capel necessarily ran some passive outfit either. Like, the job of the Premier is to chair the Cabinet, lead the government and lead the state. My staff work with their counterparts in ministerial offices, just as I work with my counterparts in Cabinet to deliver our agenda. We all work together. We all work together. Sorry? Well, for instance, media advisors weren't counted as part of the PPO under those governments. Media advisors were part of ministerial staff. So that's one point. Secondly, and the last thing I want to do is stand up here and be critical of my good friends Steve Bracks or John Brumby, but I think you'd have to concede, and I'm sure they would, that the government I lead, I'm honoured to lead, has got a lot of stuff done. Like, we have been a very, very busy government. We have achieved more, I think, than any government in the history of this state. Whether it's in construction, in reform, in enhancing the services that we need, in dealing with all manner of crises. Like, we're a pretty busy outfit. We've got a lot of stuff done. We're humbled by the support we've received by the Victorian community, and we're focused on getting on and doing more of that work. Well, who's making that claim?
I says that your advisors acted against public interest and also...
Well, people who don't work for the government anymore, haven't for years. They've made recommendations, and we're going to go through those recommendations. And you're looking at one. No, hang on. We don't need to be all talking over each other. You're making a much broader claim in that question, with the greatest of respect, and I don't think that's accurate.
So if the people that are responsible for this topic and you say your office is bigger because of it?
No, I didn't say that at all. I didn't make any comment.
You're really saying it's a security question, Jordan. It's a clear finding from you say that the people that report to us now are now out of your office. So is your office...
No, there were a number number of staff that worked for the health minister. They have not worked for that minister or any minister for years. And there was a staff member in my office, and he does not work in my office. I'm not making any value judgments. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. So there are no findings made against anybody in this report. There are recommendations, and I think those recommendations are really very, very important.
Jenny McCarcos, in her evidence to IBAC, says that the Westminster tradition of ministerial responsibility is meaningless when ministers and their staff could be directed by others in government as to how to oversee their departments. She also claims that the handover between her and Jill Hennessy mainly focused on how interventionist the PPO and Premier had been in the health portfolio. Do you think that's appropriate?
Well, the first, I wouldn't agree with the first assessment, but there might be many things that two people might not necessarily agree on, and you know, we can have a debate about Westminster traditions and what they mean and all of that. You know, that's fine. On the second point about the evidence in relation to the handover. Yeah. Well, look, I would not advise anybody to hold their breath, you know, waiting for me to apologise for being very, very interested in the biggest service delivery part of government, which is the health portfolio. I'm deeply interested in that. Any Premier who wasn't, I would think, would not be doing their job well. Now, I've been a health minister. No, hang on. Well, that's not right. I don't accept. Well, that's fine. They're her comments. They're her comments. But this is the problem here, though, right? I've been a health minister, and my Premier was just as involved, and just as concerned, and just as motivated to do the right thing by patients and their families and our staff as I am. So I've done both roles. Very few people have. So I'm uniquely placed to be able to tell you that this notion of centralisation and all that, again, people are entitled to their opinions, but the facts are, I'm deeply concerned to make sure patients get the care they need, and that's not unusual. And the reason I know that is because I've been a health minister, and Premier Brumby was just as engaged in the health portfolio as I am. Because it's really, really important.
Do you think it's appropriate for your staff?
Perhaps the most important, particularly if you need that care.
Do you think, though, it's appropriate for your staff in your office to be putting pressure on the health advisor to further put pressure on the health department to execute this contract?
Well, it's my view people should behave appropriately.
Do you think that's appropriate?
I don't think that it is appropriate to be putting pressure on anyone. Like that's my view.
Where do you think?
And the thing is, not just actually doing that, but you've got to be very careful in the way that you engage with people. Back to the point I made earlier. Like I don't get on the phone or walk into the office of a very junior public servant, because that might be quite a challenging thing. It's just not appropriate. It's not the right thing to do. Now, that's just my view, and that is my practice.
Where does this culture of impunity then come from?
Well, I don't think there is any finding in this report that would see anybody reasonably conclude that there is such a culture. So, Mayor, with the greatest of respect, there's an incident here, there's an issue here. No one's downplaying that, but you've just made a much broader point, which you're entitled to make. It's a much broader point, and I don't think that's borne out by this report.
Well, the report speaks about this authorising vibe that essentially advisors and staff in your office had, that they feel like they had.
Well, you just put, again, with the greatest of respect, I'm not here to talk about the vibe. Like, I can only talk about what is my experience, my expectations, and what I'm going to do. And that is, we're going to go through the 17 recommendations properly, appropriately, in an orderly way, and we'll report progress to you. I don't believe that the report speaks to that, confirms that culture, and I don't believe that culture exists. And that might well be borne out by the fact that over the last 8 years, ministerial officers have had thousands of interactions with departmental officials, and we have one issue. No one's downplaying it, but this is one matter that's been dealt with. in the context of thousands, maybe tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe, individual interactions with departmental officials. If there was a, as you put it, that if that culture existed, then I think we'd be in a very different circumstance. We obviously would be.
One
The
of
report
IBAC's
says that
recommendations.
Operation Daintree says the practice of advising, instructing, influencing, or applying pressure to public servants is not uncommon. That's not an isolated incident. They're saying it's...
Yeah, but that's not, but what was put to me though, and again, I don't want to get into semantics, and I don't want to be sort of paraphrasing the report or going through the report line by line. I didn't write the report, it's their report. They've written it, they've spoken to it today, I think, and you know, the bit that we're focused on is the recommendations, because that's the thing we can influence, that's the thing we can do. We can't go back and change things that happened, and we again make the point that there are no findings of corrupt conduct in this report about anybody. But in terms of culture, it was not put to me that it was not uncommon. It was put to me that there was a culture, like that it was everywhere, and I don't think that's in the report, and I don't think that's the reality.
One of the recommendations is that your document publish details of the numbers of private political staff and how much taxpayer money is being spent to manipulate those people. Is that
Well, those matters are in annual reports anyway, but beyond that, I'm not here today to confirm that we will implement all these recommendations. I don't think that's reasonable. We'll look at them and we'll make a judgment, and then we will report progress to you. There's been no cabinet process, and this report's all about process, right? So we're going to have a proper cabinet process, and then we will work out what we're doing with these recommendations. Some of them are in fact out of date. We've already updated codes, and a fair chunk of the report's out of date too. Actually, there's a whole bunch of stuff we've already done. That and there's commentary about things that should happen that haven't happened. They already do happen. Like I spoke at the ministerial induction, the all-staff induction, only a few months ago, and the secretary of my department spoke at the all-staff induction. So suggestions or inferences that there aren't inductions is just not right. It's wrong.
Jill Hennessy also said that.
We'll look at. Well, these are advisory, and we will look at it. And again, I'm not sure when cabinet will determine this. I can't give you a date, but we'll look at it, and it'll be done properly, and we'll report progress to you.
Just have to
The Attorney General's in charge of that process. I haven't got a date for you, but that'll be a proper process, and there'll be a panel to interview. There'll be all the usual consultation, and be no different to the process that was used last time, or indeed the one before that.
just my earlier question.
When your document pointed him as the previous Home Commissioner,
Yep.
you described him as one of Victoria's most independent jurists. Do you stand by that description properly?
Well, clearly it's in black and white. You've just quoted me to me, so.
You've since described him as a bloke who used to do a job, though. It's not really quite the same.
Well, he wrote a letter to the presiding officers. Didn't write a letter to me. We've covered this ground already. And I don't know that there's anything to be gained by going back over it again. If people's feelings are hurt by, the way my turn of phrase, well, equally, as I just said before, we had another former judge who I've never met and who's never met me, or he didn't know a thing about me, decided he'd give me a spray in the paper, and again, that's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. That's not what this job is about. It's not about me. It's about getting on and doing the work that needs to be done for Victorians, and that's what we are focused on always.
Jill Hennessy also told IBAC that if a PPO advisor told a ministerial office advisor that something had to happen, they would usually win the day. She said there was a power differential between ministerial advisors and PPO staff. Does that need to change?
That's not my experience.
But it's clearly her experience. She was minister.
Well, that's her experience, and she's free to have a view. But I've been, again, this is the problem, you see. This is the problem. I've been both the Minister and the Premier, and I can tell you that is not my experience. We work through issues collaboratively. We work through issues, we're all part of a team, and we're all working together, and we're all getting a lot of stuff done.
Well, clearly
but I'll put it. Hang on. Let me put it to. Well, we can do the who talks over each other for the longest. But that's not really good for anyone. I haven't finished answering the question. So, on the issue of where there might be a difference of opinion, like, I'll be really clear with you. If it comes to a priority area, if it was an election commitment, well, of course, you know, or a decision of cabinet or something like that, well, of course, you know, people might feel that someone had, you know, I don't want to use that term, sort of won the day. That's not really the issue, but like, some things are up for negotiation and some things aren't. Like, you know, getting on and delivering the North East Link is not something we're going to negotiate. We're just going to get it done.
Clearly, two of your former ministers, though, think it's a huge problem. Do you not think it needs to be addressed?
Well, did they say it was a huge problem, Samaya? I don't know that they did. And anyway, they're entitled to their views. They're entitled to their views, and I would not agree with the way they've described.
So it's not something you're even going to entertain looking at, considering, sounding out your ministers to see if it's a problem or not?
I talk to ministers every day. Those concerns have not been raised with me.
Will you actively seek out those concerns?
I've got a lot to get on with. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be in the top of my list. If people have got my doors open, I speak to all my colleagues all the time. And if they've got issues to raise with me, they will. No, I'm not able to. Sorry, Chanel. I'm not briefed on that this morning, but I can have the Health Minister come back to you, who will be across that.
One of the other recommendations, was to change the parliamentary law so that ministerial advisors can appear before parliamentary committees.
I saw that. Yeah, well, that's a very legitimate question. It's a very legitimate question, and I don't know.
So much power. Should they not be held accountable?
Well, do they, Samaya? I don't. This is the thing. Like,
well, that's what the IBAC investigation is around, though. The power that they wield.
Does it? No, but again, you've just put it to me that they, like all of them, wield so much power. Like, that is a comment. That is not found in this report at all. It's not. It is not. And there's no recommendation that says all staff have too much power. That's not what's said at all. So anyway, we can go back and forth on this. The question, I think, was a very fair and reasonable question. And it went to what's fair on staff. I think that's a genuine question. Like, staff don't necessarily sign up to be part of political debate and be on the field, as it were, right? And when I say staff, I've also been a opposition leader too. So their staff are important in this as well. It's not just ministerial staff. And there's a very different thing, very, very different, to suddenly be before parliamentary inquiries, and we all know, you know, how some of them roll. But anyway, that's something we'll look at. And that's why I'm not here today saying yes, no, but we'll have to look at that. And I think the point you raise is a very, very serious point.
There have to be really clear parameters.
Well, I think there would be, and I think it's an open question about whether you could make that a fair process, to your turn of phrase. Like, I don't know that would be fair on them. We'll have to work through all of that, and that's what the cabinet. That's what cabinet will do. And in fact, to be fair on IBAC, even the recommendation, I think, speaks to a very carefully defined, you know, sort of addressing some of the points that you've made.
When lots of colleagues came out, apologised, had a serious recommendation essentially where you go. I don't recall whether that
It had earlier on that day.
What's the difference here, though?
Well, I don't. Look, to be honest, what occurred, and was canvassed in the Watts matter was a very, very different set of circumstances. And like, you're talking about staff in ministers' offices, and the work they do. Well, you had staff in a minister's office here, and actually multiple ministers' offices that weren't doing any ministerial work. You had ministers who weren't doing any ministerial work. They were doing entirely the wrong thing. And there were, you know, all manner of. You've read the report, so have I. I think that was in a very different league. And as it worked out, we were able to have cabinet deal with that matter. We went beyond the recommendations. I informed the integrity agency heads of that, and then I went and spoke to you guys.
Has the Victorian government got any ongoing contracts with HEF or the HWU?
Don't think so, but I'm happy to check for you.
Is there an appropriate workplace violence training system in place for placed?
Well, now, much like then, I'm not involved in the delivery of those services or that system. I'd have to get the Health Minister's office to come back to you.
The union,
And what will happen, just to be clear, one of my staff in my office will ring the Health Minister's office, right, and have an interaction, they'll do their job and have an interaction with the Health Minister's office, and then the Health Minister's office will come back and follow up for you, which is perfectly appropriate. Perfectly appropriate. It happens hundreds of times every single day.
will the union be asked to pay the $300,000 that they ended up spending?
I'm not certain about that at all.
Is there any way that you can recoup that money?
I don't know. That'd be a matter for the department.
Are you
As would be standard practice with anybody who has a contract and doesn't fulfil the terms of it.
Are you aware of any other contracts with other unions where there may be parallels with
No.
this? There are no
No.
sort of training organisations?
I'm not aware of any. There's a couple of unions that have got training programs, but they use a TAFE partner, and that's exactly, again, speaks volumes to what I've always thought was the preferred outcome. Well, it's under their education functions. Yes, it's very, very clear. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And there are no findings of corrupt conduct for anyone.
No, thanks, Nat.
Anyone at all. A point that I'd
Does your government have a problem
be
with
pleased if you
integrity?
made, because it's a fact.
Does your government have a problem with integrity? IVAC's is also investigating your government's dealing with firefighters union in the lead up again to the
Well, that's a matter for IBAC. I'm not here to confirm what they are or aren't looking at. You'd need to speak to them about
I
that.
don't have a problem. Your government doesn't have a problem with
No.
integrity and transparency and accountability.
No. Well, I'm standing here like, no. Obviously, clearly, no. Any other issues? If not, we've just beat the rain. Thanks very much.